That night changed my life forever. My husband, enraged, stormed into the room, his face cold and unrecognizable. He grabbed me, tied me tightly to a chair, and then, with a razor in hand, shaved off my hair, stripping away my dignity. As I sat there in shock, he lifted a heavy vase and struck me on the head, and everything went dark. My name is Sarah, and I'm 32 years old. I've worked as a kindergarten teacher for years, dedicating my life to nurturing young minds. For the past 6 years, I've been married to Mike. When we first married, he was charming, supportive, and full of dreams. But over time, as his obsession with money and success grew, the loving man I once knew began to vanish, replaced by someone driven by greed. We lived on the outskirts of Denver, and while I tried to convince myself things would improve, the reality became harder to ignore. I still loved him, but his respect for me had long since faded. As I regained consciousness, a sharp pain pulsed through my head, and I could feel blood trickling down the side of my face where he had struck me. Bound tightly to the chair, I knew I had to get out if I wanted to survive. Fear gripped me, but a spark of determination pushed me forward. Despite the pain, I started twisting my wrists, trying to loosen the ropes that cut into my skin. The fibers bit into me, but I refused to give up. I had to escape. After what felt like hours, I finally managed to slip one hand free. My fingers trembled as I worked to release the rest of the knots. My body ached, but I wouldn't stop. As I freed my legs and stood up, my head spun from the pain, but I steadied myself and moved silently toward the door. My heart pounded as I glanced at Mike, who had fallen into a drunken sleep on the couch, unaware of my escape. Outside, the cold night air hit me, bringing a sharp sense of reality to the moment. I rushed to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. Once inside, I started the engine and drove aimlessly, not knowing where to go but certain that I couldn't stay. After what felt like hours, I arrived at a small motel on the edge of town. Using cash, I checked in and collapsed onto the bed, my face throbbing, my scalp raw, and my heart shattered. But despite the pain, I felt a surge of relief. I was finally free from his grip. The next morning, I knew I couldn't go back, not after what he had done. I needed help. I remembered Mr. Thompson, the father of one of my students and a well-respected lawyer. He had always shown kindness and compassion. Gathering my courage, I dialed his number. "Hello, Mr. Thompson. This is Sarah. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I need help," I said, my voice shaking. There was concern in his response. "Sarah, are you all right? What happened?" Swallowing my emotions, I gave him a brief overview of my situation. I didn't know who else to turn to. I whispered, feeling the weight of my vulnerability. "Sarah, you did the right thing by calling me. You don't deserve this. Let's meet today and discuss how I can help," he assured me, his voice steady and comforting. Feeling a glimmer of hope, I agreed. That call marked the beginning of my journey to reclaim my life from the man who had tried to destroy me. Later that day, I met Mr. Thompson at a quiet cafe where I could speak without fear of being overheard. As I recounted the previous night's events and the gradual shift in Mike's behavior, Mr. Thompson listened intently, his face growing more serious with every detail. He asked questions about Mike's recent actions, particularly his obsession with money and control. I described how things had changed after he won a $10 million lottery earlier in the year. What should have been a blessing became a curse, fueling his greed and distorting his personality until he was a stranger to me. "Sarah, this is not just disturbing, it's criminal," he said, his voice steady but filled with empathy. "What Mike did to you is a serious offense. We need to act quickly. I'll help you file a restraining order to ensure your safety, and I'll also introduce you to a family lawyer who specializes in domestic violence cases. You don't have to go through this alone." A wave of relief washed over me. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel isolated. Together, Mr. Thompson and I planned our next steps. Securing the restraining order, gathering evidence, and initiating divorce proceedings. But despite the glimmer of hope, I knew deep down that Mike wouldn't let me go easily. Over the next few days, as I lay low and focused on healing, a mixture of relief and dread weighed on me. I had escaped, but I knew he would come looking for me eventually. My instincts were correct. Less than a week after I left, I received an update from Lisa, the private investigator Mr. Thompson had connected me with. Lisa had been discreetly gathering information on Mike's recent actions, uncovering his financial dealings and plans, and what she found sent a chill down my spine. In a phone call, Lisa revealed that Mike had already begun shifting our joint assets into an offshore account without my knowledge. It was clear that he intended to drain our finances and leave me with nothing. She had also uncovered his recent communications with a realtor. Mike was planning to sell our house, cash in on his lottery winnings, and leave the country. It was as if he had been plotting this betrayal all along. "Sarah," Lisa said firmly, "we have substantial documentation here. This evidence can be crucial in court, not only to secure your safety, but also to protect your share of the assets." With Lisa's findings in hand, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had spent years supporting Mike, believing in the life we were building, but he had betrayed me in every possible way. This was no longer just about my escape. It was about reclaiming my life and my dignity. I was ready to confront him. The following week, Mr. Thompson filed a restraining order, legally preventing Mike from contacting me or approaching me. As we prepared for the court hearing, I gathered everything I could to prove the mental, emotional, and physical harm I had endured. We organized photos of my injuries, financial statements, and even voice recordings of the times he belittled me, trying to break me down. The day of the divorce hearing arrived sooner than I expected. I felt a mix of dread and resolve as I stepped into the courthouse. Dressed in a tailored suit, I wanted to project an image of strength, even if I still felt vulnerable. This was my chance to stand up for myself, to show Mike and the world that I wasn't the broken, powerless woman he thought he had left behind. As I entered the courtroom, I saw Mike sitting across the room, his gaze hard and unyielding. He wore that same smug expression he always used when he wanted to intimidate me, as if he still believed he held control over me. But with Mr. Thompson by my side and the weight of our evidence, I felt the balance of power shift in my favor. The hearing began with my attorney laying out the facts, painting a clear picture of the psychological and physical abuse I had endured. He presented the documentation Lisa had gathered, showcasing Mike's financial misconduct and his attempts to transfer our assets without my consent. The judge listened closely, nodding in understanding as each piece of evidence came together, building a case that was difficult to refute. When it was my turn to speak, I recounted the night Mike had shaved my head and struck me, detailing the terror I felt as I fought for my life. I spoke honestly, sharing how his lottery winnings had twisted him, transforming him into someone I no longer recognized. My voice wavered, but I held my ground, determined to make the court understand the depth of his betrayal. Mike's defense was weak and disorganized. When he took the stand, he tried to portray me as an unsupportive wife, claiming I had never believed in his dreams and that I only cared about the money. His words stung, but this time, they didn't shake me. I knew the truth, and so did everyone in that room. Mr. Thompson seized the opportunity to dismantle Mike's argument, bringing up his violent actions and the blatant disregard he had shown for our marriage vows. With photos of my injuries, the evidence of his financial misdeeds, and Lisa's testimony, our case was solid. Mike's confidence began to falter, his bravado waning as the reality of his actions came into sharper focus. Finally, after hours of testimonies and deliberation, the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. My heart raced as I waited, a mix of fear and hope swirling inside me. The judge's words were firm and clear. Mike was found guilty of domestic violence, financial misconduct, and attempted fraud. He was ordered to forfeit his claim to our shared property, pay me substantial alimony, and, more importantly, he was sentenced to time in prison. Additionally, the court mandated him to complete anger management and counseling programs as part of his punishment. Watching the disbelief spread across Mike's face was a moment of victory. He had taken so much from me, but now justice was on my side. As the gavel came down, signaling the end of the hearing, I felt a wave of liberation that I hadn't experienced in years. I was free. After leaving the courthouse, I felt a sense of relief and lightness, as if a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The legal battle was over, but I knew that my journey was far from complete. I had won my freedom, yet years of pain and fear had left marks on me, scars that would take time to heal. Still, as I walked away from the courthouse that day, I knew I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, one where I could reclaim my sense of self, rebuild, and thrive. In the days that followed, I began to piece together the fragments of my life. Returning to my teaching job was my first step. My classroom, filled with curious young minds and innocent laughter, had always been a sanctuary for me, a place where I could lose myself in the joy of my students' learning and growth. Every day I spent with my students brought me a little closer to healing. Their smiles and excitement reminded me of the dreams I once had, of the passion I held for my work and for life itself. Mr. Thompson continued to check in on me, his support unwavering. He had been a lifeline during my darkest days, and his kindness reminded me that there were still good people in the world who genuinely cared. With his guidance, I took steps to secure my financial independence, setting up my own bank accounts and investing wisely so I would never again be vulnerable to someone like Mike. Beyond the practical steps, I knew I had to rebuild my emotional resilience. I found solace in activities that allowed me to explore parts of myself I had long suppressed. I signed up for a weekend art class, a dream I had postponed for years. Each brushstroke on the canvas felt like a small act of reclamation, a way to channel my pain and transform it into something meaningful. My art instructor and classmates became my new circle of support, a group that encouraged me to express myself freely without fear of judgment. My volunteer work at a local shelter was equally transformative. Meeting others who had survived hardships similar to mine gave me a sense of purpose and solidarity. Their stories resonated deeply with me, and seeing them rebuild their lives helped me believe in the possibility of lasting change. One evening at the shelter, I met a young woman named Emma. She had recently left an abusive relationship and was struggling to find her footing. Her fear, her uncertainty, it all reminded me of where I had been not too long ago. I shared my story with her, telling her about the challenges I faced and the strength I had discovered within myself. As I spoke, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes, a spark that told me my story was giving her the courage to keep moving forward. That moment reaffirmed my purpose. I wanted to be a source of strength for others who were still trapped in the shadows I had escaped. As the months passed, I began to create a new rhythm for myself. My days were filled with teaching, painting, and volunteering, each activity adding a layer of peace and fulfillment to my life. The classroom became a place of joy once again, and every interaction with my students reminded me of the impact I could make. Little by little, the pain from my past began to fade, replaced by a sense of resilience and self-worth. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up to show your support. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. Your feedback means the world to us. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and join our community for more captivating stories like this one. Turn on notifications by hitting the bell so you never miss an update. Your support keeps us inspired to bring you more exciting content. See you in the next story.